it seems like the internal GPS receives information from our own muscles that sense our own movement. So you have sensors of movement, they go up to the brain and then go to the GPS and tell the brain about both the direction you move and the distance.
Yes, yes, you have also the speed.
Yeah, that's speed. I mean, speed,
yeah, speed
how much you speed in
yeah.
over time.
So everything is calculated and then put into this, and also the direction you're moving, and all this information goes into this internal.
If you place the mammal inside of a black box, a movie box, does that mean
you just blindfold a person. Then you start to accumulate a lot of errors, and then because you need the landmarks in order to update your map. So otherwise you get lost.
It's a map that is referenced to ourselves, but then I mean, as May-Britt said, you use what you see, the trees, the mountains, to correct it, so that next time you come back you can actually pull up exactly the same map.
And then you use your memory also to know exactly which map you should put and where this coordinate system should be anchored in the environment.
You have said your findings confirm Immanuel Kant was right. How is that?
To some extent. I think
there are some philosophers who don't like that we bring in Kant, but some do.
Yeah, but what Kant suggested is that space is a capability you have that you can't get rid of. It's just there. Your brain, or he would have said brain at least today, forces you to perceive everything in space and time. And what we see, which indirectly supports this, is that rats and mice and probably also humans are born with this, or at least it's expressed as early as you can detect it.
Born with mental faculties so that you can experience the word. So it's kind of the same discussion that we have with language. How much is there before you start to learn something? Is there anything? Is it a tabula rasa? And we don't believe in tabula rasa. And we have some data showing that there is no tabula rasa when it comes to spatial navigation and the GPS.
In Norwegian, there's a modern saying, "Fødsson," eller "blitzson." Translated into English, it would be something like born this way or develop this way.
Nature-nurture discussion.
As brain scientists, do you perceive of the human soul as a spiritual or biological entity?
Well, that's exciting. We had, can I tell about that? Because when we were master students, then our supervisor, Per Andersen, he invited his former supervisor who got the Nobel Prize, Sir John Eccles, and he wanted to find the soul in the brain, and he said that the soul is between the cells, and he had a special word for it. And then he gave a talk, and I was so fascinated. Wow, this is so exciting. This Nobel Prize winner is telling us about the soul and the brain and the nerve cells. And then Pierre said in the party afterwards, you should go and talk to the Nobel Prize winner. It's not so many times you can do that. And then I went to him and then I said, this is so exciting. But what happens to the soul? Because when people have epileptic seizures, sometimes you have to remove scar tissue, and you can use this tissue and put it in a bowl and put some oxygen on, and you can record from these cells. So what happened to the soul? Is it in the bath or is it in the brain? And then he was so upset because he thought I was rude. I was just so curious. And I think we should just be curious. We can't answer your question.
Yes, because now I have the opportunity to ask a Nobel Prize winner.
The same question.
Well, can I say what I think then? I think it's extremely hard to think of mental capacities that does not have a biological fundament. I think that's the way sort of neuroscience, that's the paradigm of neuroscience. You can explain everything from thinking to feeling and even consciousness through
Through
the way
brain.
brain cells interact. And I mean, there is really no alternative. Maybe someone will say something else in 200 years, but really, no one can think of anything else.
I think we should be satisfied by saying what we can explain, and if there are things we can't explain, like soul or whatever, then that's okay.
Perhaps it's also we could also say that the word soul is not very useful because it doesn't really. I mean, what do you mean by that? If you mean actually the mental functions you have in the brain, it's better just to call them that.
The mind.
You have just turned 50. As scientist, you are barely out of the teens. You should have at least another 20 years or more years in front of you until age takes its toll. What do you hope to achieve?
Understand more of the brain.
More groundbreaking results, and that is what is our passion to understand. At least my passion. I think that's your passion too.
I think, I mean, what you started out with is that we wanted to link psychology with biology in the brain, and when we started, that connection had not really been made. It was considered as extremely difficult to think about how brain cells could produce thinking or space, for example. But we are getting there. But each time we make one discovery, then 10 new questions come up. So I think we just continue on that path.
Without, of course, revealing anything, which you can't, obviously. But can we expect any turning points?
I think one turning point was, now I don't feel like a Norwegian, but one turning point was when we found, for example, the grid cells, because there was an obvious question, what is driving these places? We knew that the space was important, but how? And I think, like Edvard said, then we found these cells, and then we have to make models. How can you get place signal from these cells and so on? So it's just adding on with new and new questions and new answers, and that is what is so fun. And for me, I have always had this desire to understand why this and that behavior is coming from an animal or a human being. I find that so interesting.
Yesterday, Edvard, you advised young scientists to be brave. Think 2 or 3 steps ahead. To what extent is research founding system of Norway susceptible to the young Mosers today who manage to think 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 steps ahead?
There's at least one good mechanism for it, which is the European Research Council. ERC has its starting grants, which are made just for that. People who are brave need some time. They get 5 years. It's not 10 years, but still 5 years. Not bad. And they can make a small team. They get a lab. So I think that's an excellent opportunity for starting, and it's quite new. And the Research Council also has a similar mechanism. I think it's called or something like that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic system, and as you say, it doesn't need to be a big group, so you don't need to be that established.
No, it has to be a gradual process, but still it allows people to try independence.
Yeah,
and it's new. Some 10 years ago, nothing of this existed, so it was really hard to do what you said, namely to take bigger steps at that age.
And what is so fantastic with both these programs, both in the Norwegian Research Council and in the European Research Council, is that you are allowed to do basic science. You don't need to have applied science, and I think then there will be hope for us.
They specifically reward people who say that they want to take big steps, high risk.
High risk, high gain, that is so the project is what counts.
You were yesterday characterized as politically strategic researchers by one of your mentors.
I heard so, and I don't want to be a politician.
Who was that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I heard it, and I thought, I don't like strategies and being a politician. I think what has been driving us is we have this star, and it says excellent science, and then what should we do in order to get to this goal? And then we have to, as now with our new center, then I say we need happy people and happy animals, and then as a team we work towards that goal. And of course that's a strategy. But when you talk about politics and strategy, then I feel like you walk in the corridors and talk to people and so on. No.
I mean, of course, we have a strategy. That is just to do to be
vision.
focused, and we know what questions we want to address. Yeah. But I mean, no